True honor and pleasure to call up for the first time of many Rabbi Maddy Anderson to offer us some words.
You prefer this?
Yeah, that's
Okay, great. Just point at your neck.
Okay. All right, pointed at my neck, he says. You know, I'm so excited to be here. Greeting many of you at the door. I heard people say, we couldn't be more excited. We're so lucky to have you. But I've got to be honest, I think I'm the lucky one. 3 years that I've been living in this community, and I haven't had a lot of time to make it here because I've been serving a different part of our community. But I already feel like this is my home, and it's only my 4th day of work. So that's a pretty good start. So tonight I'm going to take you on a little journey of stories through my life so you can get to know me a little better. I promise in the future I will talk about Torah and Israel and anti-Semitism and all the other things I'm passionate about that you will learn about here. So as a child, I grew up going to Shabbat services almost every week and religious school also almost every week. My mom was a teacher. My parents served in every leadership role in our synagogue that you can imagine, and that meant we were there all the time. My dad was raised Methodist, not Jewish, but he was always seeking something else from the time he was a teenager, he told me. And when he met my mom and he started to spend time in the Jewish community, not really exploring, but just be there, he found a deep connection. And so our home when I was a child growing up was Jewish, and when I was 9, my dad converted studying alongside my brother for his bar mitzvah. So that was a really beautiful experience. You know, I was young, so I only have a little bit of memory of it, but I know it was special for my dad and really special for my brother to get to do that. The other thing I think that I connected to really deeply as a child in Judaism was music. You might be like, why aren't you a cantor? Well, you know, I'm working on it. I'm not as talented as Cantor Mark over here, and so I thought Rabbi might be a better way to point myself, but you'll get to hear me sing someday too. I think that the act of singing and of singing Hebrew prayer is what connects me most deeply. It's when I feel most spiritual. So my love for music actually came out of prayer, and it wasn't until years later that I started singing contemporary music in a choir. As a teenager, like many other Jewish teenagers, I went to summer camp. So I grew up in Indiana, and I went to camp in Wisconsin at Olin Sang Ruby Union Institute, OSRUI for short. At camp, my love for Jewish music continued to grow, and I think that's where my understanding of Jewish peoplehood began to sprout. Hearing the contemporary music from Jewish artists who I was meeting, listening to them sing, pray the words that they had written in a way that was reaching me, I think, even more deeply than perhaps the traditional service that I was receiving as a child. And I made some of the greatest friends at summer camp. And that's the peoplehood piece for me, is understanding what it's like to live with Jews on Jewish time. So we prayed every day. We were doing Jewish activities. And for 4 weeks in a row, I went to Shabbat, not with my parents, not like get dressed up, get in the car, the whole thing. No, there was a different process doing it with my friends. And it felt like it started to become mine, this process of celebrating Shabbat every single week. I would say as the other thing I want to share is as a Jewish teen in Indiana, and this is a little bit of a right turn, but as a Jewish teen growing up in northern Indiana, I was one of very few Jews. My high school had 2 Jewish families. It was my brother and I and another family, sister and brother, about the same age. It was a small school, but I think even so, it was difficult to be the only people with our experience. And I faced anti-Semitism in high school in Indiana, both in the school system. So one story is that state exams were scheduled on Yom Kippur. Exactly. Not only is it terrible, but by the way, it's illegal. So at least in the state of Indiana. I don't know, I haven't learned all of California state law. So my mom sent many letters, made many calls, and was prepared to go to the school board, but after she spoke out loudly and set a really good example for us, the school changed the date, and we didn't have to do that. So that was a sort of systemic anti-Semitism, or sort of looking over the Jewish experiences and experiences that were not Christian. The other experience I had was in 11th grade in a geometry class when a student asked to cheat off of me, and I said no. And he said, "I hope your family burns like the rest of the Jews." He was moved to an alternative school program for my protection, but he wasn't expelled, and there was no education that went into the school system. So it was just like instant removal, done. So this is what it's like to grow up in a small town. And then, for some reason, I put myself in the same situation in college. I loved my college experience, but I was one of 8 Jewish students at the University of Indianapolis. I know, why would I do that? There's schools in Indiana with lots of Jews, you know. But it was a great program, and I don't regret it. I think even though we were small, the 9 of us, so it was me and 8 other Jewish students, we sort of built our own Hillel experience, even though we didn't have a Hillel. I was the only one who lived off campus, so my home became home base. Now, we didn't do Shabbat every single week. If I could go back, maybe we would, but we celebrated a lot of holidays together, and we connected over Kiddush, over Jewish food, and over sharing this experience of being 9 Jews on a campus of thousands of students. It was a really important space for me to start to learn what it felt like to be a leader in my Jewish community, even though it was just a really small group. Well, something else I did while I was studying for my business degree was travel to Ghana, Africa, to learn about microfinancing. So this is supporting small businesses through microloans. On this trip, we volunteered in a primary school, and while getting to know the students, we really just fell in love with them. So we asked the leaders of the school what their big dreams were, because we hoped that maybe we could come up with a project to continue serving their needs. And they had this dream of an English library. In Ghana, to go to high school, you have to pass an exam, and that exam is in English. So in order to get past 8th grade, you have to speak English, even though it's not the main language. French is. Very confusing. But this is sort of the way of business in the world, and I think in order to be successful, this is what they hope for their students. So over many years, and with the support of other students and professors at my university, we collected books, we built a library in this school, we helped them expand past 5th grade all the way to 8th grade, and now this is a school that is sending students to high school every year, and isn't just educating the students in their building, but the library is open to their entire community, so it's provided access to education in a way that they didn't have before. This is the main project. There's lots of other little projects we did in the about decade that I did this work, traveled there 3 times. If you want to learn more, please ask me about it. I'm really passionate about that work that I did. So then I realized that corporate business was probably not for me. I loved the service work that I was doing in Ghana, and I knew that I wanted to work in nonprofit. I wanted to do some kind of community service, but at 22, I had no idea what that should look like or where to start, and so I applied for an AmeriCorps position. If you don't know what that is, it's a national service position where they place you in a local nonprofit and you do what they need. You help them out. And so I ended up working with Habitat for Humanity in Indianapolis for a year in the AmeriCorps program, and I learned to build homes. And once I learned to do the projects, I was then tasked with teaching volunteer groups. And my favorite part, although the construction is really fun, and I'll talk about that anytime as well, my favorite part was working with the volunteers. It was being on the build site every day, talking to people, getting to know them, learning what they cared about, why were they there, sometimes because they got the day off work if they volunteered, sometimes because they were really passionate about the organization. A lot of times, they didn't know the organization's mission at all. And so I took it upon myself, even though it wasn't really a part of my construction job, to really spread the mission of the work because I believed deeply in it. And the director of the organization saw how deeply I cared and basically recruited me to be their administrative assistant when my AmeriCorps year ended, which felt like a really direct path for my business degree to go into administrative work. But it turns out when you've been out in the field talking to people for a year, it's really hard to put yourself back behind a desk and answer phones and emails all day. It's a different world. And so I found that even though I cared deeply about the mission, it wasn't the right job. It wasn't the right career path for me. And I started seeking something in the Jewish community. I was lucky to work at Indianapolis Hebrew Congregation for about 2 years before I started rabbinical school, and there I helped them build a communications department that didn't exist before I started. It was great work. It's a wonderful community where my mom is still a member, and I'm connected. But again, it was behind a desk, behind a computer, and it just wasn't the right fit. I knew that there was something missing. And so one day, talking with the youth director, who I became close friends with there, she pulled a folder off her shelf from Hebrew Union College because as the youth director, she has recruitment folders. And she said, "Maddie, I think that maybe you should consider being a rabbi." I really thought she was crazy. I had never considered becoming a rabbi before, not because I didn't know women could be rabbis, but I did grow up with a male rabbi, so it wasn't my vision, but I just hadn't considered it. I spent about a week before I talked to anyone, not even my mom, who I was living with at the time, and I realized very quickly that she was right. The love I had for service work, the love I have for Judaism, my desire to be in front of people, as well as some pastoral care goals that I'll share with you at a later time, were all reasons that I knew being a rabbi could be a perfect fit for me. And so I visited the Cincinnati campus. I found a friend who could tutor me in Hebrew. That was a lot of work. But I'm really glad I did it, and I still have work to do on the Hebrew. But I got far enough to get in, and about a year after I decided I wanted to become a rabbi, I was moving to Jerusalem. Finding my spiritual center in Jerusalem was a complicated struggle between the joy of learning to become a rabbi and the reality that I often felt unwelcome as someone who looked obviously Reform. A woman with a kippah and sometimes a talit tucked under my arm, easy to spot. But I didn't let the look stop me from also making positive connections with shopkeepers and taxi drivers who were curious about my worldview. One taxi driver even put a kippah on my roommate's head because 3 of us in the back seat were wearing them. We were all leading services that morning. And Suzanne wasn't wearing one, and he said, "Where's yours?" And he pulls it out of the glove box, and it's on it. So it's I had my hard moments, but that's maybe one of my favorite stories of what it was like to be a woman wearing a kippah in Jerusalem. I think in my year in Israel, I most appreciated really living in Jewish time, like I got to do as a child at summer camp. I loved the hustle to get ready for Shabbat, the challah I baked fresh almost weekly, and sitting around a table to share a meal with my good friends. Then we would come together for morning prayer and community, and all year we shared holidays together through Israeli culture and delicious Israeli food. And many months, for Rosh Chodesh, I would wake up before the sun and walk to the Kotel, the Western Wall, to join my friends and women from all over Jerusalem in a morning of audible prayer, a form of spiritual protest in a space where women are not permitted to pray aloud. When I returned to the United States to complete my studies, I chose the Cincinnati campus, not because I didn't want to come to Los Angeles for the sun, I kind of did, but my family was in Indianapolis and I liked the idea of being a 2-hour drive away. Turns out that was a good choice because halfway through rabbinical school, COVID shutdown began. And I was able to spend a lot of time with my family during rabbinical school that I would not have been able to do otherwise. And so for that, I have a lot of gratitude. The work I did during my time in Cincinnati really pushed me to grow as an educator and a spiritual leader. Locally, I taught in numerous religious schools, sharing the beauty and joy of Jewish life with young children. I traveled regularly to Petoskey, Michigan to serve as the student rabbi for their local Jewish community, which while small was thriving and had people of all ages participating. I led Shabbat services and Torah study, taught in their religious school working with the B'nai Mitzvah students. I officiated 2 baby namings, and most importantly, I built meaningful relationships with the members of that congregation that still last to this day, though we talk a lot less. My final experience with the Petoskey community was a 3rd set of High Holy Days, which is really rare when you're in rabbinical school, but because of the COVID shutdown, they asked if they could please have me one more time because they already knew me, and High Holy Days were gonna be so difficult without being together in person that they wanted a little bit of familiarity. I think this was one of the first times that I really felt like a rabbi because I knew the community, I knew what they needed, and I felt like I could craft something that would be as meaningful as possible in the time that we were in. Along with services, I pre-recorded a meditation that they could use walking through the woods or along Lake Michigan, and I recorded some children's services that parents could watch with their kids when the time was right, because when you're stuck at home with your kids all day, the time is not always right to turn on the service and have them sit still. I also worked for the Jewish Community Relations Council in Cincinnati, and there my time was concentrated in interfaith community building, Israel education, and combating anti-Semitism. In my final year of rabbinical school, I served as our representative at the JCRC at an interfaith community building meetings. In this group, I participated in planning a citywide Festival of Faiths exhibition, an event that brought together around 30 faith groups in the city to learn about and celebrate each other's cultures. We worked together to build an interfaith calendar that put all of our holidays in one place to share with local school systems in an effort to make them more aware and sensitive to religious experiences of all of their students. A less positive but also formative experience I had there was assisting a student from the University of Cincinnati with an anti-Semitism complaint. She found herself in a Middle East Studies course that was riddled with anti-Semitic articles, videos, and other forms of propaganda. Hours of combing through a semester's worth of material led me to write pages of notes that we would eventually summarize and help the student submit. In the end, the complaint changed nothing. The professor was allowed to continue teaching the material as planned. Around the time I was finishing up this complaint, I was also applying for jobs because I was months away from my rabbinic ordination. Hillel went from being an organization I was thinking about to the job I wanted to have. When I received news from Rabbi Evan that I would be the rabbi educator for our students here in Santa Barbara, I was thrilled because I knew that I could make an impact and I was ready for that California sunshine. The truth is, I could talk for a long time about my gratitude for my past 3 years in Hillel. It was the first place I was called rabbi and actually believed it. And my days were filled by interacting with passionate, smart students who are driven to do good in our world. On October 7th, when Israel was attacked, I was shocked and devastated, and I knew exactly where I needed to be, with my students. Being a campus rabbi during the first year of the war often felt unbearable, but every student I supported through a difficult moment gave me the strength to keep going. Last year, when campus calmed down and this job opportunity became available, I knew it was time to give myself a new challenge and a new adventure. As a congregational rabbi, I'll have the opportunity to engage with a community of all ages and stages of life, something I'm really looking forward to. I'll be here to support you through good times and difficult moments, the ups and the downs, every life cycle that you experience. And in the coming months, as I settle in and continue to learn more about this community, I'm excited to meet with you and with other members who aren't here tonight. My goal is to learn who you are, not just to ask you what you want here, but to meet you, because I want to know you. And I want to be able to serve you the way that I could serve that community in Petoskey, because I knew them so well. And so I hope that you'll reach out to me. I promise I'll reach out to you too. But if this sounds good, send me an email, give me a call. Let's get coffee, let's get lunch, let's talk. I'm honored to stand here before you today as your assistant rabbi and look forward to the years ahead where we will continue to grow together. Shabbat shalom. That's fun.
And that is why I'm excited. Thank you, Rabbi Maddy Anderson, for those amazing introductions to yourself. Now we don't have to ask you anything about you. No. You have amazing stories to tell.